When I was younger, I didn't fully understand why things were the way they were. But one moment stands out in my mind, a moment that changed everything. My mother once told me, "If I had known about your developmental disorder, I wouldn't have had you. You're an unnecessary presence in our family." Hearing those words shattered my world. My heart felt like it had stopped, and the world around me turned completely dark. It was a weight I carried for years. It wasn't long after that my father announced, "Let's start fresh. A new life begins for the three of us." He said this loud and clear, sticking his head out the window of the car, right in front of our grandparents' empty house. And then they drove away. My parents left me behind, laughing as they sped off, leaving me standing there, frozen. I was just 9 years old at the time, and all I could do was watch the car disappear, feeling completely abandoned. I'm Grace, and I'm 24 now. I have a twin brother, Daniel. We used to live together with our parents, but it's been over 9 years since we've been apart. The reason is tied to the past we both shared, a past I can't easily forget. Our family wasn't anything out of the ordinary. My father had a regular office job, and my mother worked part-time while also managing the house. Like any other family, we lived a simple life. But things started to change once we reached elementary school. That's when my brother's talents began to shine. He was naturally good at school, always expected to get perfect scores, and teachers couldn't stop praising him. "You're amazing, Daniel. Another perfect score. You're so talented and will go far in life," my mother would say with a proud smile, while my father would laugh, agreeing. He might become a scholar, a doctor, or even an athlete. He'll never have to worry about money. My brother was their pride, and it was clear to everyone. But me, I struggled. I couldn't focus in class. The sounds of chairs moving, the click of mechanical pencils, and other distractions made it hard for me to concentrate. I would get scolded regularly by teachers, and instead of being helped, I was often ignored. As the years went by, my parents seemed to shower all their attention on Daniel. His favorite foods were always on the table. He was the one who went out with them for fun, and if he wanted something, it was always granted. Meanwhile, I was left to fend for myself, neglected in a way that was hard for me to express. If I had been able to talk to someone back then, perhaps things could have changed. But I couldn't. I struggled to speak, to put my thoughts into words. I couldn't explain how I felt or why I was struggling. Even as an adult, I still find it hard to communicate clearly. Sometimes, when I think I'm answering a question or giving a response, I end up saying something irrelevant, missing the point completely. I've gotten better, but the struggle never really goes away. According to my mother, I was born with a mild developmental disorder. While I've grown and learned more over the years, I still face difficulties that others might not understand. As a child, I was often difficult to handle. But just because I was different doesn't mean I deserved to be neglected. I was still growing, still learning, and still deserving of love and care, just like anyone else. My parents, however, didn't see it that way. They would often look down on me, comparing me to my brother, who they saw as perfect in every way. I could have stood up for myself and tried to defend my worth, but back then, my parents held all the power. I couldn't argue with them. So, I kept quiet. I smiled, even when it hurt, and didn't fight back. As I got older, my relationship with my brother started to change too. When we were younger, we were close. But as he grew, he became more distant. He didn't understand me anymore. "Don't talk to me at school," he'd say. "It's good we don't look alike." I wouldn't want anyone to think we're related. His words hurt, but I couldn't say anything back. He saw me as nothing more than a burden. He began to ignore me completely, and the kindness that once existed between us faded away. My parents never noticed how Daniel treated me. They never cared, and they certainly never paid attention to the way they treated me either. Slowly, over time, I became invisible to them. No more attention, no more affection. I was just there. Now, as I reflect on the past, I realize how much it shaped me. It's been a long road, but I'm learning to stand on my own. Even though I was neglected, misunderstood, and often overlooked, I've come to understand that I deserve better. I am not just a side character in someone else's story. I'm the author of my own life, and it's time for me to write a new chapter. My days were reduced to just waiting for the rare moments when I would receive any attention, and even then it was minimal. Special occasions like birthdays and Christmas felt the same. My parents would take my brother out to eat, but for me, there was nothing special. No birthday cake, no treats, no gifts. Instead, I would get a supermarket meal, pre-packaged and discounted. I was left alone, stuck with the task of house-sitting while my brother enjoyed the attention. Even during the New Year celebrations, it was no different. My father would tell me, "You stay in your room. I can't concentrate with you around." So, my New Year's celebration consisted of eating snacks in my room, listening to the sounds of laughter and cheer from the living room, and feeling more isolated than ever. When it came to study materials, my parents would dismiss me completely. "You don't need any study materials. What's the point? You can't do anything anyway." They said it so matter-of-factly, as if I didn't matter. Only my brother was given a desk, educational materials, and the chance to succeed. I felt defeated. With no encouragement at home, my grades began to drop, and I lost all motivation to study. It felt like I had no place, not at school, not at home. But there were two people I could rely on, two adults who treated me with kindness, my grandparents. They lived far away, over 4 hours by car, so I couldn't see them often. But twice a year, during the summer and holiday breaks, I was allowed to go visit them. The rule was simple. I wasn't allowed to speak. Still, those trips meant everything to me. Their house was nestled in beautiful countryside, far removed from the hustle and bustle of the city. To my brother and parents, it might have seemed boring, but to me, it was a paradise. The vibrant colors of nature fascinated me, and while my brother buried himself in his studies, I would sit with my colored pencils and draw. I would sketch what I saw in the countryside, trying to capture the beauty on paper. My brother would scoff, and my parents would glance at my drawings with disdain, but my grandparents were different. They hung my simple drawings on the refrigerator, praising them. "What a beautiful sunset you've drawn," they would say, and at that moment, I felt understood. Not because my art was amazing, but because they saw the effort I put into expressing myself, even if I couldn't find the words. They loved my brother, of course, but they didn't treat me any differently. They treated us both the same, showing love equally. Those rare visits with my grandparents were my emotional refuge, the only time I felt truly seen and valued. Then, when we were 9 years old, just as spring break began, my parents shocked us with an unexpected announcement. "We've sold our apartment," my father declared. My brother laughed mockingly. "You're really stupid. It's been sold. A new life awaits us in a new house." I was confused. If the house is sold, where are we going to live? What about school? When are we moving? My questions were met with anger from my father. "Shut up. Your questions are always pointless. We've been preparing for this for a long time. Pack your things quickly." I hadn't noticed it until then, but the living room was already packed up. I had been so isolated in my room that I hadn't seen the gradual disappearance of things around the house. Panicking, I held back tears as I quickly packed my things into cardboard boxes. But I could only take a few toys and the bare minimum of clothes. Most of what I owned were things I had brought home from school, and I hastily packed them up, trying to stay calm. "I'm ready," I said, my voice barely a whisper, as I stood with my school bag. "Everything's packed." But my father wasn't interested in my efforts. "Forget about your report cards. Just get in the car quickly," he snapped, tossing my box roughly into the trunk. The harshness of the moment stung, but I didn't protest. There was no point. My life felt like it was being packed up, discarded, and tossed away, just like the things in that box. I climbed into the car, holding my school bag tightly. Something felt different, though. My brother Daniel, who always sat next to me, was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Daniel?" I asked, feeling confused. "It can't just be the three of us going, right? Aren't we missing something?" My mother shot me a sharp look. "You're supposed to be quiet in the car," she snapped. I fell silent, my confusion only growing. "It's hard to understand you," she muttered. "We gave your brother some pocket money and let him go out to play. Be quiet if you understand." I didn't know what to think. As I stared out of the car window, I absent-mindedly watched the trees, their flowers blooming beautifully. But then, a small spark of hope flickered in my heart. Maybe, just like in the past when they took only Daniel out, this time they were taking me somewhere fun. Maybe this was their way of surprising me with the move. I smiled to myself, the excitement growing. My parents were talking softly to each other, but I didn't pay attention. I was too caught up in the idea that this trip could be something special for me. I never imagined that this happiness would soon be replaced with betrayal. Eventually, I fell asleep. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by my mother's loud voice. "Wake up, take your school bag, and get out of the car." Groggy and disoriented, I stepped out of the car. And then I froze, my heart skipping a beat. We were in front of my grandparents' house, the house I loved so much. "Yay, Grandma, Grandpa," I said, rushing to the door with excitement. But when I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. The door was locked. "Mom, I can't get in," I said, confused. "Oh, it's a weekday today," my mother replied dismissively. "They're probably still at work. I just called them. They'll be back soon. See you." She didn't even look at me as she grabbed my luggage and tossed it in front of the door. She turned right back to the car without a second glance. "Wait." "Where are you going?" I called out, feeling the panic rising in my chest. "Mom, Dad." "Where are you going?" My mother shook me off like it was nothing. "Your brother got into a famous private elementary school. It guarantees that he'll progress through every grade. He's already set to transfer there next term. We sold the apartment to pay for his tuition, and we're moving to a new house for him. But having you around only distracts him. It also adds extra food costs." She paused, looking at me with a cold expression. "This is your chance to stay here. Just stay with your grandparents." "Wait, what's going on? Am I changing schools? Am I going to a different school?" My mind was spinning. "That's exactly what annoys me about you," my mother snapped, raising her voice. "You're always causing trouble. You're a burden to me. Your grades are terrible, your appearance is below average, and you can't even have a proper conversation. Your brother is such a good kid. Why do you always make things difficult?" Her words felt like a slap, leaving me speechless. I could barely breathe, much less find the right words to respond. "Did I do something bad?" I asked quietly, almost choking on the words. "If I did, I'm sorry. I don't need your apologies. They're just empty words." My mother's voice was sharp. "If I had known about your developmental disorder, I never would have had you. You're an unnecessary burden on our family." When she said this, it felt like the ground beneath me had vanished. I was overwhelmed by the weight of her words. My world went completely dark. "We're leaving now. A new life begins for the three of us," my father said loudly, sticking his head out of the car window. His voice was final, unyielding. I stood there, frozen, desperate to stop them, to make them see me, to make them understand. "Don't go," I pleaded. "Please don't leave me behind. Dad, Mom, am I such a bad child?" My mind was a whirlwind, and the words just wouldn't come out right. I couldn't express how much this hurt, how much I needed them to stay. As I struggled to speak, my mother glanced at me coldly and turned toward the car. "Sorry to keep you waiting," she said. "Since we're here, we'll buy a cake from the bakery and take it home to Daniel. You can eat it with him." All I could do was stand there, staring, as they drove away without a second thought. "Grace, are you okay?" I heard a voice, soft and kind. I turned to see my grandparents standing in front of me, their faces filled with concern. By the time I realized what had happened, it had already gotten dark. My world felt so empty. I had been abandoned again, left behind as if I didn't matter. But at that moment, as I looked into my grandparents' worried eyes, I realized that at least someone cared. Even if my parents had cast me aside, they were still here, and that small comfort was the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. While I waited for my grandparents to come back, I must have fallen asleep without even realizing it. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. My grandfather noticed right away. "Your hands are cold, and your face is so pale," he said, wrapping me in his jumper. Gently, He lifted me onto his back and carried me to a warm room. I could feel the warmth starting to spread through me, but my mind was still too clouded to understand everything. My grandparents were moving quickly around the house, speaking to each other in tones that were full of concern and anger. "How long has Grace been waiting out there?" they exclaimed when they saw the message on their phones at work. They were shocked to find out what had happened. The message simply read, "We've left Grace in front of the house. Please take care of her." My grandparents rushed home immediately. If they hadn't found me when they did, I don't even want to imagine what could have happened. At that time, my grandfather worked as a craftsman and my grandmother worked tirelessly at a local restaurant. They were both always so busy. Yet, my parents didn't let them know in advance what was going on. They sent that brief message, and that was it. No further explanation, no concern for how I was doing. The realization that my parents didn't care enough to inform my grandparents ahead of time hit me like a cold wave, reminding me of how insignificant I was to them. As I sipped the hot milk my grandmother gave me, I felt the warmth seep into my chest. It calmed my racing thoughts, and I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. My grandmother gently stroked my back, offering comfort as I cried. Meanwhile, my grandfather stood up abruptly and called my father. The conversation grew heated, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. Eventually, he slammed the phone down, his anger boiling over. "Grace, I spoke with your father, but it seems we can't communicate properly," he said, his voice softening as he turned to me. "Can you tell me what happened?" Tears streamed down my face as I tried to explain everything that had led up to this moment. My words were jumbled and scattered, my emotions making it hard to speak clearly. But my grandparents listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. I finally choked out the words. They said I'm an unnecessary existence because I have a developmental disorder. They said it would have been better if I had never been born. Mom and Dad want to create a new family with Daniel. As I spoke, I felt the weight of those harsh words pressing down on me. But then, without warning, I was wrapped in a tight, comforting embrace by my grandmother. "What are you talking about?" she said softly. "You are a wonderful child, no matter what anyone says. You are irreplaceable to us. We're so happy you were born." Her words were like a balm to my broken heart. "People's worth isn't measured by intelligence or appearance," she continued, her voice steady. "Your grandfather and I are just ordinary people. We didn't attend prestigious schools, but we lived our lives doing what we loved. You may not be great at academics, but you have a rare talent for sensitivity and expression. That's something no one else has. That's uniquely yours." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, and the tears started to flow again, but this time they weren't born from sadness. My grandparents had shown me something I had forgotten, that I had worth, that I wasn't just a burden. "There are no adults here to make you feel sad anymore. You don't have to worry," my grandfather added, rubbing my head gently. "I'm sorry we didn't notice it sooner. You've been doing your best." I cried in their arms, overwhelmed with emotion, but it was different now. Their love and support helped me begin to heal. From that moment on, I began living with my grandparents. They enrolled me in a small, local elementary school where the teachers were kind and understanding. One of them, in particular, became the first person, aside from my grandparents, who understood me. Because the school was in a rural area with only a few students, the teachers were able to implement a personalized educational program that took into account my unique characteristics. They helped me move through lessons at my own pace, which made all the difference. As a result, my grades, which had once been poor, began to improve. I struggled with communication, but slowly I came to accept that my uniqueness was not something to be ashamed of. I started to make friends, and I began to live a much more peaceful, balanced life, both mentally and physically. I even started to find things I truly wanted to do, and over time, I found my passions. 14 years passed, and during all that time, I never heard from my parents or my brother. Their addresses and phone numbers changed, and slowly, their faces faded from my memory. I had moved on with my life, found a new family with my grandparents, and built a future for myself. But then, one day, it all came crashing back. "Open the door," You're in there, aren't you? The sound of someone banging violently on the door shattered the peaceful calm of the early morning. My grandparents had already woken up, but I froze, unsure of what was happening. My heart raced as the noise grew louder, each thud more urgent than the last. I had no idea who it was, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever was about to happen would change everything again. I woke up groggy, disoriented, and unsure of what was going on. My grandfather's angry voice cut through the fog in my mind. After leaving your daughter for over a decade, what do you want now? His tone made me freeze. Slowly, I walked toward the entrance, confusion clouding my thoughts. When I stepped outside, my eyes widened in shock. There, standing in front of me, was the woman who had given birth to me, but she didn't look anything like the mother I remembered. The woman in front of me looked tired and worn out, as if life had taken its toll. Beside her stood a man who looked different too. The once slim figure of my father had given way to a man with a bulging belly. They smiled, reaching out their hands toward me, trying to act friendly. I stiffened. My eyes narrowed. If you are my parents, why are you here? Don't act like we're strangers. We came to talk, my mother said, her voice dripping with a false sweetness. Yes, we know the workshop is doing well now. Your dad's getting older, and as both a manager and craftsman, he's reaching his limits. So, we've come back. I thought I'd take over the business. We also heard that our lovely daughter is set to inherit from him, and we think that should be ours to take. My grandfather snorted in disbelief at their words, his voice full of disdain. Oh, so you've come back for the leftovers and to take over the business? How presumptuous. An amateur with no understanding of glass artistry wanted to take over our workshop. We've already decided who our successor will be, and it's Grace. She will take over. She's a genius. My father's face twisted with disbelief. What? This child? She can't do anything, he scoffed. Before I could react, my grandmother threw a newspaper at his face. What are you doing? Look inside, you fool, she said, pointing to the paper with her finger. My father flipped through the pages quickly, his eyes growing wide as he alternated between looking at me and the article in shock. It was an article from a recent interview, young glass artisan from a local workshop to the world. The headline blared across the page. When I was in middle school, I started to take an interest in my grandfather's work. At first, I was just an assistant in his workshop, but as time went on, I became more involved. Eventually, my grandfather recognized my talent and took me on as an apprentice. I was fascinated by the idea of capturing the beauty of nature through glass, and over the years, my passion grew. A few years ago, I completed a piece that had been my dream to create, and after I began selling it, it gained popularity on social media. Quickly, I became known as a prominent glass artisan. Now, I even receive orders from restaurants and stores abroad. We expanded the workshop and started online sales. You are indeed our daughter, my father said, his voice now laced with exaggerated praise. Not like that useless, timid son. I blinked in confusion. Useless, timid? Those words were so opposite to the brother I remembered. I turned to my mother, trying to make sense of what she was saying. She glared at me. Just listen. That useless Daniel, she began, speaking with a strange excitement. He graduated from university and got a job at a top company. Everything was going well at first. But after years of being praised as perfect, he became arrogant and fragile. Just a little scolding and he quit his job. Can you believe it? He quit after just a year. Now, he mostly stays in his room. He barely leaves except for the bathroom or shower. We had to quit our jobs because of him. I was stunned. This was not the brother I remembered. The brother who once seemed so promising, so full of potential. It was hard to reconcile this version of him with the one I once knew. Hey, Dad, my father said, shifting the conversation. Forget the inheritance for a moment. You have money, right? Can't you take care of us three? Or at least just us two? My grandfather stared at him, incredulous. Do you two only care about yourselves? Daniel's still young. He'll figure something out. He's not a child anymore. But for us, it's impossible to find new jobs at our age. Hey, Dad, listen to your loving son's request, my father persisted. My grandfather, dumbfounded, sighed deeply and walked back into the house. As I stood there in shock, my mother turned to me, her eyes bloodshot and tired. You should come live with us, too, right? Oh, wait. You don't understand what we're talking about. She spoke in a tone that made my heart sink. All you have to do is nod along. My father nodded in agreement, but his expression was blank. I felt my blood run cold. I could barely process the words that came next. Why do I have to live with strangers? I asked, my voice trembling but firm. We are your real parents. My mother's voice was harsh, her anger rising. We raised you. I stared at them, trying to make sense of the twisted version of my family that had reappeared after all these years. I had been left behind, forgotten, and now they wanted to pick up where they had left off as if no time had passed. As if all the pain they had caused didn't matter. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face the people who had so easily discarded me once before, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to be pushed around again. When I was a child living with my parents, I never felt truly cared for. It was as if I barely existed in their world. They didn't see me, and they certainly didn't make me feel loved. It was my grandparents and my teachers who were the ones to raise me, to nurture me, to guide me when I had no one else. They were the ones who truly cared for me when my parents couldn't or wouldn't. As I stood there, facing my biological parents, I felt nothing but a cold distance. I looked at them, and they seemed like strangers. I had no memories of them caring for me, no recollection of the warmth and affection that parents should show their children. They had abandoned me when I was just 9 years old. You may be my parents by law, I said, my voice calm yet firm, but I have no memory of that. I can't live with strangers. The silence in the room was thick as I waited for their response, but none came. My grandparents, who had always been my true family, didn't say anything either, but their quiet presence made me feel supported. The look on their faces, their silence, told me all I needed to know. They were on my side, as always. My father, clearly frustrated, looked at my grandfather and muttered, "Don't you think that's a terrible thing to say, Dad? Say something." My grandfather simply smiled, his calmness a stark contrast to my father's mounting anger. My father pressed on, his voice rising, "If you want me to, I'll say something too. It's strange to say you raised Grace when you abandoned her at 9. No, not about me," my father said, stumbling over his words. "Say something to Grace. Say something to your grandfather. Say something to her." My grandfather, undisturbed by the tension, chuckled softly. "Don't abandon us now," he said, his tone light. Frustrated and clearly losing his composure, my father tried again. "Hey, Dad, enough already." My grandfather interrupted with a stern voice that rang through the room. His words were final, and they cut through the chaos. "Why would you say such spoiled things now?" The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, and my parents froze. In the quiet that followed, my grandmother hurried off to the kitchen. When she returned, she held a large bag in her hand. "This is perfect," she said with a steady voice. "Now, get out. You bad luck." With that, my grandmother began tossing salt at my mother's face. My mother cried out, "Ouch. What is this?" "This salt," my grandmother explained calmly, "is for cooking. Parents who abandon their children are the epitome of bad luck." She continued to throw the salt, her motion unhurried and deliberate. "Go back already," my grandmother shouted. "I'll keep throwing salt until you leave. We have plenty of it, so be prepared." Beside her, my grandfather stood, holding a new bag of salt. He joined in, tossing the salt with force, hitting my parents directly in the face. "Hey, Dad. Mom, please stop." My parents cried, their voices pleading, but my grandparents didn't stop. They continued their silent assault, their faces set in determination. "Go back already. Never come back," they yelled. My parents, desperate and confused, clung to my hand, begging me, "Are you going to abandon your parents? We're drowning in debt. We're struggling to survive. Shouldn't family help us out?" I pulled my hand free from their grip, my voice steady but cold. My family is only my grandparents, I replied, my words sharp. With one firm motion, I took the bag of salt from my grandmother and emptied its contents over my parents. This moment, this act felt decisive. It was my way of severing the final ties that had held me to them. Goodbye forever, I said, watching as they recoiled in shock, their faces filled with disbelief. Without another word, they fled the house, running away as if they had nothing left to hold on to. As time passed, my brother appeared at our workshop. It turned out that when my parents had fled, the debt collectors had been chasing them, and in the chaos, they had left Daniel behind. The debt collectors came to our house and evicted my brother, leaving him distraught and alone. The police took him in, and when they contacted our grandparents as his only remaining relatives, my grandfather proposed a solution. One who does not work does not eat, he said matter-of-factly. If you work hard and help out in the workshop, we'll provide you with a place to live and meals. What do you say? To my surprise, my brother agreed without hesitation. Despite his earlier success, the weight of reality had knocked him down. He started working in the workshop, but it was clear he was still unpolished. My grandfather didn't sugarcoat things. He often scolded Daniel, pushing him to do better, to improve. But as always, my grandfather's guidance was steady, and under his watchful eye, Daniel slowly began to learn the value of hard work. It was a new beginning for him, but one that would take time and patience. As time went on, my brother began to change. At first, he was just a worker in the workshop, struggling to find his place. But soon, he started showing talent in areas like online sales and accounting. His skills became invaluable to the workshop, and he quickly became indispensable. Over time, my brother, who had grown up so differently, began to reflect on his past actions. He started to feel ashamed of how he had treated me before, and he began to acknowledge my abilities. It was a strange feeling, and I can't say we've fully reconciled yet, but it's both delightful and a bit embarrassing to see him treating me kindly now. I never expected this change, but it's a step forward, even if it's just the beginning of a new understanding between us. Just when it seemed like my brother was finding his place and being recognized for his efforts, something unexpected happened. Our parents reached out to him as if nothing had changed. "Daniel, where are you? What are you doing? It's getting dangerous here. We might end up on a fishing boat. Please help us," they pleaded. Their message focused entirely on their own problems, completely ignoring what they had done to my brother in the past and how they had left him behind without a second thought. It was too much for Daniel. He had finally started to make a life for himself, and their selfishness was the last straw. Without hesitation, he changed all his phone numbers and email addresses, cutting off all means of contact with them. It was his way of protecting himself from their constant chaos. I often wonder if they've ended up working on a fishing boat, as they mentioned, but I have no desire to find out. In truth, both my brother and I felt a great sense of relief after severing ties with our parents. We no longer had to worry about their unpredictable and selfish behavior. Instead, we could focus on building our own lives. Now, the dinner table is surrounded by people who truly care for us. My grandparents, my brother, and I may not have fancy dishes, but there's something so comforting about the warmth we share. The food might not be extravagant, but there's mashed potatoes made by my grandmother and a slightly misshapen dish made by my brother. My grandfather enjoys his beer from a glass that I made, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm surrounded by love and stability. It's a simple life, but it's a life I never had as a child, and for the first time, I'm experiencing a happiness I thought was beyond my reach. I've found a sense of peace that I never knew before, and it's all thanks to the people who truly care about me.